and right to be able to respond. Trump is saying at some point this has to stop in terms of the tit for tat, that this happened and this happens, this reaction, that response, and that seems to be exactly where he is. Now, he's on his way towards the NATO meeting. That's over in the Hague in Europe. Now, several leaders have chosen not to attend. Quite interestingly, the freshly elected president of leader of South Korea, has said that they are not going to be attending. Now, this is being interpreted by some of the MAGA types as some sort of a message potentially coming back through China. Now, I'll explain that in greater detail a little later, but certainly not friendly to the position of China when it comes to things is Japan. The Japanese leadership has said that they are not planning to go to NATO either. The leaders that are currently on the ground already speaking to reporters, among others, is Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. Now, he has said tonight that he praises the ceasefire and he recognises the importance of, a few days ago, the decision of Donald Trump to drop the bombs that he did, but appreciates the ceasefire where it currently is. The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who, remember, about a week ago, was himself hosting world leaders at the G7 summit. Well, he too has been speaking to reporters in The Hague, where he has said that he supports the president's view of things here, that essentially a line has to be drawn. Now, again, we were expecting that there was going to be some sort of a media statement to camera by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in this hour. Now, presumably, the full ability of communications of a United States president means a phone call has already happened or may well be happening as we speak, as he prepares himself to take off, as Air Force One starts to make its way from Andrews Air Force Base off to Europe. But very much the sitting position of the President of the United States is that it is up to Israel to help draw a line under the 12 days of conflict. Of course, 12 days ago is when the Israelis decided to, take on Iran directly, wipe out as much of their military and even political infrastructure as possible. There was then, of course, before last weekend, an expectation that Donald Trump, after leaving that G7 meeting that was in Canada, was going to be joining the effort, or at least was considering joining the effort to hit Iran. That, of course, took place over the weekend during a period of time that the United States and through the President, of course, had said that they were going to make a decision within the next 2 weeks. Of course, even when that announcement had been made, already the final planning was underway. So effectively, there was no real attempt to move back to the negotiating table. There was a want for the President of the United States to do his bit to assist Israel, and that was to drop those bombs in the middle of the night in Operation Midnight Hammer to take out 3 of the significant Israeli enrichment sites. And again, reading through the tea leaves here, the expectation, you would imagine, of the President is, in a transactional way, to be attempting to say to the leadership of Israel, look, I stepped in, I helped, I'm now asking you to help me draw a line under what is taking place. Because remember, under the temporary ceasefire that was announced at the start of today, that kicked in this afternoon Australian time, that once we hit, say, 10 p.m. Australian time, without any further issues, then that would move into a permanent ceasefire scenario. Of course, during that 24-hour period, we've had Iran strike back at US military facilities like the ones we've been pointing out for the past few nights that are dotted all over the Middle East. Of course, Qatar, Kuwait. Now, the leadership of Qatar is outraged that Iran had decided to enter their airspace with missiles and knock out or try to disrupt those American bases. But also, it seems that Iran had attempted on some level, perhaps because they have no further ability to do more damage, but in a face-saving exercise, because remember, they don't care what the world thinks of them. They care about
we're streaming
consumed by their domestic
Twitch,
population. And
YouTube
largely,
right now.
while they have access to the internet, generally speaking, they also have access to things like VPNs to be able to get around the Iranian news services. The Iranian news services have been saying that the ceasefire only took place after Donald Trump had begged for a ceasefire after the so-called destruction of the American bases. So we know that, like everything, international leaders, they have their own domestic populations to deal with. Understandably, the Israeli community wants the Israeli Prime Minister to respond to a missile that had fallen after the ceasefire had kicked in, that has taken life. From the Iranian perspective here, and I am not suggesting moral equivalence, it's pretty obvious who the aggressor in the scenario has been, and that has been, of course, Iran trying to get a nuclear bomb with the express permission of wiping Israel off the map. Well, they are trying to tell their own people that they stood up for themselves, they fought back when it came to Israel, but more importantly, they were able to push America back into its own corner. Now, obviously, that is not true. But as you've heard in the past 15 minutes or so, Donald Trump essentially, again, saying to the Israelis, please help me draw a line under all of this. I helped you, so please help me. But obviously, again, there are people on all elements of this who want to make sure that their main constituency is not the international community, but about what will be taken from home. Let's go to a full frame here as we start to see the cameras move away from Air Force One as it starts to make its taxi away and the journey towards yet another international meeting. Think about what has happened, and this is extraordinary. Think about what has happened in the past 7 days. In the past, 12 days, of course, is when the first of the Israeli strikes on Iran helped blow major holes in their political and military infrastructure, as well as the threat that they pose, at the very least the nuclear threat that they pose to other nations, certainly focused specifically in and around Israel. About a week ago, you had the President of the United States who was in a meeting with other world leaders in Canada. That was a 2-day meeting of the Australian Prime Minister scheduled to be meeting on that second day. But he left after the first day. Now, apparently, in part, that was because the Iranians had apparently delivered a direct threat through a proxy. Now, whether that means staffers, people at the meeting, or potentially another world leader, part of the story that we will eventually learn when people are asked more questions or write their books or anything like that in the next little while. And the direct threat was that if you come after us, then we are going to come after America in America, because we already have people loyal to the regime in Iran, and those people will commit deadly suicide terrorist attacks. That was the moment that Donald Trump decided, I'm out. He left that meeting of the G7 halfway through. He returned to the Situation Room where apparently the final elements of the planning, or at least the beginning of the permission for the bunker buster strikes in Iran, were being put in place. At the end of last week, going into last weekend, Iran believed, or at least what was being said publicly, that they were being given a 2-week window to talk. That was being interpreted as a 2-week window to maybe move some of the stuff that they didn't want to get blown up in those strikes by the United States and Israel, for those things to be moved out. There has been some footage of a train load of semi-trailers that were moving equipment out of some of those facilities. Again, then, last weekend, the scenario of the US strikes, where there were 14 of those bunker buster bombs that were dropped in 3 separate locations, as well as a whole collection of Tomahawk and other missiles which were being fired from, among other things, submarines and carriers that were in the area. Pretty extraordinary. Then, again, chronologically, following through these incredible days, then Israel decided to continue with its strikes, particularly as we were live on the air. Remember things like the doors being blown off a prison where political prisoners were. Also, they were taking after and moving closer towards trying to destroy things that were part of the Iranian regime. Of course, their tight control over the country Now, while obviously, when we've been hearing about some of the missiles and ordnance that they have been hurling towards Israel, some of them being as old as technology from the 1980s, their capacity to keep throwing things seems to be very much dilapidated. We then had the scenario where, of course, the Iranian foreign minister went to Russia while we were on the air last night, and the Russians have said today that their best support that they could offer to Iran was not, as the former Russian president, but still part of the Security Council in Russia had said, which was to offer a nuclear bomb, a ready-made one, to the Iranians. Instead, it was to support the ceasefire. Then, of course, the ceasefire rolls in. A missile lands in the north of Israel. The president says, let's rule a line under it. Israel says they are set to respond, and we could hear something any moment now. But as you can see, Air Force One is making its journey from the United States to The Hague in Europe for another meeting of world leaders. Again, 7 days in the world, 12, 13 days in the Middle East that we've all seen play out live on our televisions morning, noon and night, no matter where we are all the way around the world. But the message from the President of the United States before getting on that plane was, Israel, do not drop those bombs, i.e. do not respond to what had taken place. If you do, it is a major violation. Bring your pilots home. Now, as we speak, we are searching for all of the usual sources for information from the Israeli government, be it the Defence Minister, the political officials, or the Office of the Prime Minister. Again, suggestions were that he was to make a statement at some point in the next few minutes. But again, Donald Trump, the direct message here to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli military leadership is, help me draw a line. Let's make the ceasefire.
Site when we talk about this situation, plus the size of the tariffs.
Right. So let's assess the current economic situation. The Monetary Policy Report states that longer-run inflation expectations, quote, continue to be broadly consistent with
that was a popper
2% inflation, unquote. And a Harvard study argued that despite the relatively quick price responses to tariff announcements, the overall magnitude of these changes remains modest. So if these conditions hold, is it not unreasonable to think that underlying inflation trends
that EU headline, that's what gave us this volatility here.
That's certainly a very defensible position. I think what people, others on the committee think, and what I think, is that this is a question we need to be careful with because it's different than it was in 2018. The difference is that we haven't had 2% inflation. In 2018, we hadn't had an inflation as high as 2% for a decade anymore.
Right.
This is a different situation. We haven't fully restored price stability.
catching that screen regardless. So far, it's quiet. Just integrate my video game here.
That you run our economy. This is your bailiwick. Do you think he's got a good policy? Answer me.
I would never comment on the President of the United States in that way.
All right. What do you think our policy should be?
We play no role in either.
This guy, I think, is just going to
or
keep
commenting on
asking
tariff policy
questions
or
that
fiscal
he's not
policy
going
for
to
that matter.
answer. Like
Let
It's
me
not our
tell you,
business. We have a
all of his
specific
time.
mandate. We try to stick to it.
Let me tell you something, Chairman.
I don't know why they waste their time asking
For some
questions.
reason.
They just
I got the
go around it.
fastest
It's
growing
ridiculous.
trade group down there. The Port of Savannah is indeed our nation's fastest growing party, and it's rising even more. The cost, the expenses, our business community is suffering. And I want to know
What's he talking about?
our tariff policy.
Or what
I
policy?
want you
What do
to
I
weigh
tell
in.
my people?
I want to know what
What
your
do we
favorite
Probably
Pokemon
nothing,
is.
'cause you're not
What's your
very
favorite
smart.
Pokemon?
You're a good man.
What a goof, man.
I
And you're a
want to
good
know
man.
the answer to this question. I
That's
want to
great.
know how
I'm
you
glad.
feel.
Yeah, I'm
This
sure.
whole tariff question.
I know, stupid.
It's
man,
a
so
tax
stupid.
increase. It's running people out of business. What do you think about that?
All these people
Give me
belong
What's
in
some-
running
Louisiana.
people out of
He's
business?
on 1 HP.
Do you think?
I know. It's like telling
about our
businesses to
tariff?
freaking
Can we
quit
allow
passing the
people that
cost.
will actually live
Don't
to the
you feel
future
you
that
have
they
a
dictate?
Oh my
responsibility
goodness,
here?
for real.
Are you afraid
For real.
of President Donald Trump? Why
Are
don't
you afraid of
deal
President
with
Donald
this?
Trump? Oh my goodness.
Because our economy
Lord.
are suffering in a mighty bad way.
I think your
And,
brain is
I've
suffering
got
in a
to
mighty bad way. Is what I would say to
represent
that.
My
This
constituency.
guy, man, come on.
And they are, let's take Georgia's agricultural
This guy's
sector.
crazy.
Mostly
with it, man.
pecans and poultry and cotton
Pecans.
exports. They've been hit
Cotton
hard
gins.
by retaliatory tariffs from key trading partners
And newspapers.
like China.
Like
Why are you
China.
running away from the tariff fight? Give us
Big
some
towns.
understanding of that.
What? What did he just say?
Honestly, I'm not sure what you said.
We are.
I'm not either. I don't understand what he said either. That's,
You know,
What
an
language that
institution.
was.
What did you just
comments
say?
On or analyzes decisions that the president makes, or the things that he runs for office on and is elected on, and then does. We don't. That's just completely out of our lane. It's really inappropriate for me to have any comment on that. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Scott.
We're having
could
these
ya
regional
anyway?
disruptions.
Just do
No.
it
Our
anyway.
economy is
No.
in a bad way. And
You're in a
I
bad
wanna
way,
see
dude.
You and the president, you gotta get together on this.
What?
We got pecans,
You gotta be kidding me.
Georgia. We got
We got
peanuts. We
pecans.
won the
Pecans.
Group. We got the fastest growing
What?
trade mechanism.
Won't
in the
somebody think of the
Savannah Port
pecans?
Authority.
Somebody,
Think of the
crushed it.
pecans.
somebody do something about this guy.
My business
That's
folks
what
are
I'm saying.
coming to me
come on, man. Come
I got to
on,
get some
dude.
answers.
Got
from
tariffs on pecans.
What do I tell
I got tariffs on the
Tariffing them right out of the
Sheriff
ground.
feels about
In Georgia.
No, not the
This is
pecans.
embarrassing.
This guy is embarrassing.
tariff? I think we need to get you and the president together.
I think we need to get you
Oh,
and a
thank
therapist
God. That was the
together.
longest, whatever amount of minutes they get.
Get that guy a
Someone
therapist.
think of the pecans.
Get that guy a therapist, man.
That was a waste of time.
Yeah, I
A lot of
agree
it's
with you.
become a waste of time.
Total waste of time. This is crazy, guys. Like, some of this is nuts. This is your tax dollars at work, man.
Adore
Come
living the
on.
American dream. So,
Woo.
putting that into context, I wanted to ask you a few questions about.
Ask me
the
some
labor
questions.
force.
Ask some questions.
We agree with what the President Trump is doing, or what the administration is doing in deporting illegals, criminal illegals. We do not want them to well, we
Not
don't really want people
pecans.
who have committed any type of crime, even more if they are illegal. And but we do know that unfortunately what's happening right now after 6 months of being Mr. President being in office, that we're losing thousands and thousands of workers, what the ICE leadership has called collateral damage. And most of those people are working in three main sectors: construction, hospitality, and agriculture. Even the president said the other day in a tweet that he understands that those hands are needed. We're talking about 15%
I can't get
of
over
the
it.
economy: construction, hospitality, and
that crap.
agricultural. So my question to you is, what is the growth effect on the economy if
What?
this type of removal of people, of hands being removed from those?
Hopefully Americans will get off their
main topics?
ass and get up and get a job.
Immigration's another area where nobody
Get off
put us
government
first.
assistance. How about that?
Congressional Budget Office
It's like
and other
get up,
agencies
get a
that do
job,
assessments
go
of that.
work like everyone else
Our,
works.
we do have
But
a role
thinking
to
we're
maximize
exempt from
employment.
working, that would be
But we
helpful.
take immigration policy as just, we
Come
take it as
on.
it comes. What it's obviously done is it's
That's the problem.
really reduced the amount of growth in the labor force. And so,
That's the
at the same
problem.
time, demand for workers has been coming down as well, because they've been
Let me
coming
just
down.
reduce
as
Demand
one
for
drop
workers
at
has
a
been
time.
coming down. No, no.
Growth.
What?
Why don't we talk a little bit more, because we want to continue growing.
The demand
We
for
want
workers
economy
is
to
coming
grow, we want to
down.
continue growing, so you're saying that what's affecting
Where?
growth?
Well,
That's
there are
not
two
what he
things that
said.
affect growth. One
He
is
said growth
growth
of
in the labor
the
force,
labor
more people
force.
working, and the other thing is productivity. How much do they produce for hour work?
That's clearly lost.
And when you significantly slow the growth of the labor force, you will slow the growth of the economy. But I think, again, it's not for us to have a view on immigration policy.
Oh, no, I
can just
understand. It
report
was
that.
just my comments, but you do agree that if we don't have those hands, then we don't grow.
We can't talk
think
about
that
any of
growth-
these
growth
issues
will
until we
slow and
fix the
actually is slowing
pecan
this year, and that's one
catastrophe.
of the reasons.
We
I know,
have to
right?
fix the pecans
So now
first.
Give
let's talk
me
about
a
the
break.
next 10 years.
Give me a
2025,
break.
2035. Americans are not having enough kids, so that means that we need other people, right? So over the next decade, based on the current trends that I just explained to you and that you just reiterated, will there be enough workers to fulfill the labor needs of our economy in the 2020s?
Yeah, if Americans get off their ass and go to work.
I think labor economists
Yes. Why don't you encourage people to go work? Why? How come we can't do that?
We're going to be met by the
This is
domestic
ridiculous.
population, the native-born population, and the answer appears to
Let's
be
go work,
probably not
y'all.
in the next 10 years.
And then what about if we do not have that labor force over the next 10 years? What happens?
So many things will happen. You can see a big increase in productivity, which would mean we don't need as many workers. For example, artificial intelligence could be implemented in a way that creates widespread productivity gains. I wouldn't count on that, but it's a
You
possibility.
would not. You would not count on that?
I wouldn't count on it.
You would not.
No, I mean, I think
Why
there'll
not?
be gains because with productivity enhancing things, they typically take longer to be implemented, and then it takes a while for the gains to be shown. I think in the case of artificial intelligence, those gains are coming, but they may take longer or be less in the beginning than expected.
And during the time that those changes happen, then what happens? Our economy doesn't grow. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
We
but I
need
mean,
pecans.
those who make immigration policy are entitled to.
Them dang pecans.
We,
No, I
we can
hear you.
report on what
It's all
happens.
about them
but it's really
pecans.
not our
Get them
job.
pecans
No,
out of here.
It's not. I just want to hear
but the
what you're thinking,
pecans.
what's your expertise.
Let's
based
address
on
the
those
pecans.
immigration laws
Can
that
Let's
we
AI
have.
address the pecan.
I'll ask them 'cause I only
Let's
have
do something
20
else.
seconds.
Let's go to the
Do you think that
live. Let's go to
with
the
every-
live without any more interruption, y'all. Let's go to the live without any interruption here. Let's see. There's got to be. Let's see here. Let's see if this will give us.
We have talked about, do you think that we can continue
That's better.
remaining, or the United States economy can continue being the #1 economy in the world, and that we could compete if we were to have the immigration laws that we have right now?
I think you could have, you know, the highest per capita earnings, but if you're talking about the aggregate output, then, you know, population growth may be a constraint.
And which one of the two is more important?
Gentleman's time has expired.
Good question.
Well, you can, I think you,
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
All right.
Let me turn
Thank
to
you,
the
Chairman.
ranking member of the
Expired.
House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Himes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Chairman Powell. Let me start by thanking you for your careful keeping in your lane and steering clear of fiscal policy, and in particular for your stalwart defense of independent monetary policy. You're getting pressure from very powerful places and lots of kibitzing from lots of members on the interest rate question, and most know better that our independent monetary policy is the very bedrock of our economy. So thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, I want to talk just a little bit about some of the technical matters associated with energy prices and inflation, because obviously turmoil in the Middle East has sent oil prices swinging wildly, with West Texas Intermediate in the last month or so being anywhere between $61 and $75 a barrel. We recently saw the Iranian parliament vote to close the Strait of Hormuz, which currently handles around 20 million barrels a day, a fifth of global demand, and a little bit more in terms of natural gas. Chair Powell, you said last week that conflict in the Middle East in the 1970s resulted in very large inflation shocks. In contrast to the 1970s, today the United States does not import most of its energy. We call ourselves energy self-sufficient on a net basis. But I hear the argument made that I think is wrong, that because we're energy self-sufficient, somehow we are insulated from global energy market prices. Can you comment on that? Is there any validity to the notion that we are not, American consumers of energy are not subject to global swings in energy prices?
Yeah, so the price of oil is set globally, right? And I think if you go back a few years, the thought was that when the global, we had a natural shock absorber, which is that we would just drill more. And that we would, if prices went up, we would drill more. And so you wouldn't have these sustained price shocks that we had during the 1970s and the original OPEC era. I think that is actually in question now because, you know, the oil industry in the U.S. is being much more careful and focused on return on investment than they were, having been burned with overcapacity.
Right, and I mean, yeah, in the long run, you can invest in additional extraction technologies, but this does not respond to day-to-day spot prices. So
not quickly,
the point I'm trying to make is that the conflict in the Middle East, if it resulted in $120 barrel oil, which is where oil was in 2022, that would have a fairly substantial inflationary impact on the American household. Is that correct?
We would certainly feel that, you know, and as we've discussed earlier, there's a lot of lore around looking through oil price shocks, but that depends on the facts and circumstances.
What, as a technical matter, we tend to refer to CPI, which is a basket of goods, and we measure the price changes. Roughly speaking, what percentage of that basket is comprised of energy?
I don't have that on the top of my head. It's much less than it was, of course. And oil consumption is much less than it was in the 70s as a percent of GDP.
But energy includes natural gas and gasoline, and that's it's a meaningful portion of the
yes. Although of course we have more natural gas than we have so much natural gas, so that'll always be there for us.
So none of us can predict what's going to happen in the Middle East in an hour, much less in a week or a month or a year. But as a technical matter, at what price for a barrel of oil does the American household begin to feel inflationary effects? So we're at $75 a barrel roughly right now. At what price point does the American household begin to feel some inflationary effects?
I don't want to throw out a number. I think we're frankly, it's too early to say that something like that's going to happen, and I know you know that. I wouldn't want to throw out a specific number. If prices went up materially, people would feel that.
This guy.
Okay.
This guy.
Again, I think if I look at the data here, WTI per barrel about it peaked at about $120 in 2022. What do your models suggest would occur to inflation, and how would it influence the Fed's thinking? Should we be back at $120 a barrel?
Well, let's just say there's a big price spike in that range. So, we would look at that and we would ask ourselves, look at the overall situation. We would ask ourselves, should we react to that? So, for example, during what we called the Arab Spring, back in the early.
Let's look at something else. How to use NVIDIA broadcast app and Streamlabs. NVIDIA's got a broadcast app. Look at my finger!
One of the biggest annoyances that has always existed when trying to use features of Streamlabs with the live streaming software OBS Studio is all the manual customization required just to pull in your alerts, widgets, a window to read your chat. That's why I am so excited today to show you guys a brand new plugin from Streamlabs that has officially made using OBS Studio that much easier. Let's get to it. So the first step to fully integrating this Streamlabs plugin into OBS is to first make sure you have OBS Studio downloaded. If you don't already, just go to the OBS project website and you can download it for your respective computer. You'll then want to head over to streamlabs.com/OBS plugin. I also left a link in the description below so you can follow along. Go to this page, and when you scroll down just a little bit, you're going to see an option to download the plugin. Click on that and then go through the installation process. There's no special things here you need to configure, just restart your computer. For those of you guys using a Mac computer, the plugin is not available as of to date filming this video, but stay tuned as it should be available very, very soon. Now, once you've restarted your computer, go ahead and launch OBS Studio, and you should see two docks with the Streamlabs logo spinning inside of them. If you for some reason don't see those, then go to your docks and then scroll down to where you see Streamlabs recent events and chat, and make sure that those are checked off. Keep watching this video to the end because I'm going to show you what these docks will look like when you're using OBS Studio while live. Now, next up, you guys should have seen the Streamlabs plugin window pop up somewhere on your desktop. If it's closed out or didn't launch for you, then you can always go to OBS and click the Streamlabs tab. That'll open the plugin window right up. From here, you can go ahead and log in either using your Streamlabs ID or one of your social media accounts that you plan on streaming to. After you're logged in, you'll then be presented right away with an option to add theme overlays to your OBS and tipping, both of which can be done later. Next, you'll then have the option to choose the plan that you want to use use with the Streamlabs plugin. And luckily, this is completely free, guys. There's no watermarks, there's no catches, no gimmicks. It's 100% free. Yes, you can go the ultra route if you want, but the main benefits with that is the ability to multi-stream, as well as getting access to some super nice overlay packs. Now, next up here is where the Streamlabs plugin magic happens. Starting on the left-hand side is where you're gonna see all of the features of this plugin: widgets, overlays, widget themes, stream labels, CloudBot, tipping, and multi-streaming. Starting off with the widgets, this is where you guys can add your alert box, your chat, your stream events. All you need to do is go over to one of the widgets that you want to add and select add, and that will immediately add it to your existing scene that you're in within OBS Studio. So as you can see, the alert box has added in automatically as its own browser source. So this completely takes away the manual effort of adding your own browser source, having to grab the link and then put it in within OBS. The plugin does this for you with one click. Now I can just take the box, put it wherever I want within my scene here. And let's say I want to test this alert. All I need to do is go over to the test events option here, or even there's one over here as well. Then I can go up to, let's say, Twitch, for example, select follow. And then if I go back to my OBS, I can see that follow alert is working. Another thing you guys are going to want to keep in mind is that in order to pull the audio from these widgets into your OBS, you're going to need to double click on that browser source and then make sure control audio via OBS is selected. When you do that, you're gonna see another source pop up in your audio mixer. Now, when I do a test, you're gonna see that audio come through, which means it's working. If you wanna make edits to the settings of these widgets, you can just click on the settings option for that widget you're looking to update, and that'll open up your Streamlabs dashboard on the web app to make the changes there. Next up, if we jump over to overlays, this is where you're gonna see all of the assets that you can add to your stream to give it a more interesting look. Luckily, there's a bunch of free ones that you can use. So if you scroll all the way down, you're gonna see the free overlay section, and you can just select view all to see all of those overlays. And you can also sort by featured, just added, popular. And if you go in the middle here where it says free, you can add the animated option so that you can see the ones that are a little bit more visually stimulating to the eyes. Jumping over now to widget themes, this is where you can modify the look of your alerts, chat box, and event list from the default if you don't want to continue using that. You can use these, which look a little bit more custom and interesting for your stream. These also have some free options, so if you scroll all the way to the bottom,